Welcome to another episode of the Ultimate Freedom Teachings video series.
Robert here. Welcome to another episode of Friday Q&As. This week, the question that I'm answering, which is a question that, looking at all of the ones that have been submitted, there's a pattern that this one shows up a lot, so I figured I would address it this week. And the question is, what's the difference, Robert, between what you call the Phase 2 teachings, the busting loose teachings, and the ultimate freedom teachings that I'm starting to see you use that term all the time? What's the difference? So I'll go into that in a minute, but first, if you're watching this video and you don't know anything about either body of work, either body of teachings, the Phase 2 busting loose teachings or the ultimate freedom teachings, you'll see a link appearing on your screen right now. I would invite you to go to my website, register for a free training that I have that comes by email and video that will ground you in the basic concepts of the teachings and fill in all those gaps for you. So it's robertscheinfeld.com/training, robertscheinfeld.com/training, and you'll see that link on the screen here. So I invite you to do that because otherwise a lot of what you're going to see here probably won't make sense. Some of it will. That said, okay. Everything that I share, everything that I coach on, everything that I write about, everything that I teach on, comes out of something that I experienced myself to a very deep degree. My journey has been very unusual in that respect, which is that I have had this passion, this commitment, this obsession, whatever you want to call it, of experiencing as much truth with a capital T as possible while in ordinary waking everyday consciousness, living your life, being fully functional. Just to do that, and also because there was a knowing that if I could do that, the more truth with a capital T I could experience, the better everything else in my life would work and all the problems would get solved and all these kinds of things. So there was a dual, just a desire for truth, a hunger to experience truth and to know it, and then also to have the knowing and experience of it ripple through and make big changes in my life. So the pattern that's repeated itself over and over and over on my journey is, been there, done that, experience it to a deep degree personally. And my personal preference, as it turns out, I never thought about this, is experience it to such a deep degree that there is no question that anybody can ever ask me that I can't answer from actual experience. Not from thinking, not from a theoretical, not from a possibility, but because I've experienced it myself to such a deep degree. And then once that happens, I pop up and I offer what I call a debrief. And the debrief might be a book, it might be a course, it might be a live event, it might be something else. And that pattern has repeated itself multiple times on my journey since I began to write and speak and teach and coach. So, what we would call the Phase 2 teachings, the busting loose from the money game, busting loose from the business game, busting loose teachings, were one of those debriefs. And it was the biggest quantum leap that I had experienced in my life at that point. And I popped up and offered that debrief. What's called the busting loose teachings, busting loose from the money game, busting loose from the business game, the Phase 2 teachings, were one such debrief from one such phase or segment of my journey where I was taken very deeply into truth with a capital T in that way. Very experiential. Popped up and offered that debrief. And what I shared in the Phase 2 Busting Loose teachings is exactly what the model that you could say I embraced, the philosophy, the science, and the practical piece that I embraced, and the 4 tools that came with it, in order to create massive changes in my life. And if you don't already know, and if you do know, I just want to reinforce it. The metaphor that I use to talk about the unique piece that I have to offer and share is, I like using the metaphor of the sun and the clouds. And the sun is the equivalent of truth with a capital T. The sun is the equivalent of who you really are. The sun is the equivalent of the life that you really, really want deep down. Not that you think you want, but that would really float your boat, that's part of your mission, your purpose, what your whole life is really about, is the equivalent of the sun. And I'm going to visually depict the sun as a fist like this. And then the experience of that, truth with a capital T, who you really are, true prosperity and abundance, all the stuff that would really float your boat, the stuff that you really hunger for deep down, is represented in this too. It's complicated, but speaking simply, it's here too. And then what happens is a very solid, dense layer of cloud cover gets built that blocks your experience of this. And as long as this very solid, dense layer of cloud cover is in place, blocking this, you don't experience this. And it doesn't matter what technique you use or how hard you try or how badly you want it or how much money you throw at it, as long as the cloud cover is in place, we don't experience this. And what I discovered on my unique journey is what this block really is. And by the way, it has nothing to do with the subconscious mind or karma or the way your brain is wired or limiting beliefs or any of the stuff that's typically taught in personal and spiritual development. The block's something else. And I discovered two things. One, what the block really is, and how to remove it so that you can experience this with this big blockage, this hidden blockage that nobody talks about or knows about in most cases. Remove it. So, the Busting Loose Phase 2 teachings and the tools that came with them were how I first began to become aware of what the block was, and I first began to start the process of removing it. On my journey with the teachings that I experienced and then later shared, it wasn't where there was one lightning bolt moment where boom, this just was taken away. On my journey with the Phase 2 Busting Loose teachings over time, the metaphor would be that you had these 4 tools that would create a drill bit, if you will, metaphorically, that would cut through this very solid, dense layer of cloud cover. And it would happen over time, little bit at a time. You drill tunnels, poke holes, knock out chunks, and more of the sun would shine in, and whatever it shined on, whatever aspect of your life, you'd experience radical change and transformation. So the Phase 2 Busting Loose teachings were the first pieces of what's the block, why is it there, how is it built, how does it work, and the first phase of removing it. And by embracing the model, the philosophy, the science, the pieces of that teaching, and using the 4 tools and cutting through the cloud cover and knocking out huge chunks, everything started to change in my life. Everything. No area of my life was left untouched. And then something happened that really surprised me. After a lot of this had been removed, not all of it, but huge chunks, and a lot of the sun, of truth with a capital T, and what that was really about, and so many things were shining in and changing and transforming, I was then taken deeper, and I began to see different things about what's in the cloud cover, how does it actually work, deeper levels that I hadn't seen with the Phase 2 and the Busting Loose teachings, and I hadn't experienced. I began to see more of what was in the block, and I also began to see that there was another way to knock it out. And it didn't involve tools. It didn't involve, in my case, it was 6.5 years of using the 4 tools and drilling through the cloud cover. It doesn't have to be that long. I know people that it's been longer, and I know people it's been much shorter, and it's all different. We're all unique. But for me, it was 6.5 years of using those tools, and I discovered there was another way to create this, to knock out the cloud cover that didn't involve any tools, much less the 4 that I used originally, and that was much quicker, and in some cases, much easier. And so that's how the Ultimate Freedom teachings were born. I used the 4 tools myself for 6.5 years. I drilled through, poked all kinds of holes, knocked out all kinds of chunks of the cloud cover, more and more sun shone in. And as more sun shone in and I began to experience that sun, all of a sudden there were these new insights and there were these new experiences and there were these things that I did not anticipate. I didn't figure, I didn't have any vision of happening. It was all complete surprise and in some cases shock. And amazing, but complete surprise. I wasn't anticipating it, expecting it, didn't have a clue. It just happened and it was amazing. And then what happened for me on my unique journey was, okay, I had this unique experience. And I would like to help other people to have this same experience in this different way. Not the tools, not the drilling, but a different dynamic. And then I thought, well, something happened to me. Something happened to me. Is there a way for me to create a something happening to other people either exactly the way that it was revealed to me and happened to me, or maybe slightly differently? Would there be a way to replicate this, or was this just my weird, unique, weird Robert way of knocking out cloud cover? And so I first started to offer the Ultimate Freedom teachings, and I began to see some interesting things. One, yes, it could be replicated. What happened to me could be replicated, and the same kind of thing could happen to other people, and they could experience the same knocking out of the cloud cover, the same experiencing the sun and what's really in there, truth with a capital T. And then my question was, well, for me, I had to use the tools for all that time, and I had to knock out a bunch of cloud cover, and then this stuff was revealed to me, and I experienced these. Do other people, is that the way it has to work? Does everybody have to embrace the earlier teachings and drill for a while and knock out cloud cover and then and I didn't know the answer to that question, but what I found out was no. For some people, that's the best way, as it was for me. But there's no rule or formula, there's no must, there's no prerequisite. And I realized somebody could have known nothing about me, nothing about the Phase 2 teachings, nothing about the busting loose stuff, go right into the Ultimate Freedom teachings, never use a tool at all, and experience this and everything that comes with it at a much more accelerated pace, in a much easier way, although it still literally blows your mind and shakes things up in your life, but it's different than what used to happen for many people, not everybody, with the busting loose model, the Phase 2 model, and using the tools. So the difference is, ultimately, to me, the key to everything, and the unique piece of the puzzle, again, that I have and can offer is to support people in knocking out the cloud cover. And what I discovered, which again, from some perspective doesn't really make sense, but then from another perspective it does, but to me it's true anyway. My bias is when you knock out the cloud cover, everything you were trying to change, fix, and improve in your life, all of the kinds of things you were using techniques and strategies and hiring coaches for and all this stuff takes care of itself. From the sun shining, it takes care of itself in all kinds of different ways for different people, different for me than different for you. It takes care of itself. So to me, the magic comes from simply knocking out the cloud cover. So what's the difference with all that introduction? What's the difference between the Phase 2 Busting Loose teachings and the Ultimate Freedom teachings? There's a few differences, and I'll just summarize them for you again, but I already covered them. First, they're both ways of knocking out the cloud cover, and they're different ways of doing it. One involves tools, one takes a longer period of time. One, that's the Phase 2 Busting Loose teachings. The Ultimate Freedom teachings tends to be much more accelerated, and there's no tools. It's an experience that you have that causes this, and you just experience it, but there's no to-do list, there's no techniques, no tools, no practices, no anything that you do every day. What I call the Ultimate Key to Freedom experience, which is offered online and live, usually in my home, for a very small group of people, it creates the experience of this starting to separate and then ultimately completely separating and allowing the sun to shine. More accelerated, no tools, no techniques, no practices. And so that's the difference. And the difference is because of my unique journey of me being on this journey into truth, being on this journey of trying to change, fix, and improve my life, being on this journey of wanting to experience the truth with a capital T and have it ripple through everything, these were stages. The Phase 2 Busting Loose teachings were a stage. Invaluable. Huge amounts of cloud cover were knocked out. Huge transformation in my life across the board, which led to experiencing and seeing with a capital S the Ultimate Freedom teachings, and then discovering that for some people, the best route is start with the Phase 2 teachings, use those tools for a while, whatever a while means, and then move into Ultimate Freedom. But then other people can just start with the Ultimate Freedom teachings, experience this happening, no tools, no techniques, no strategies. And once this happens, again, two interesting things happen. One is all the other stuff that you've been struggling with and the results you've been trying to produce and how do I do this and how do I do that and what's blocking me and all this kind of goes away, and it takes care of itself. And it feels easy and effortless and fun the way that it takes care of itself in ways we don't have time to talk about in this video. And once this happens, fully, which is what the Ultimate Freedom Experience supports you in doing, is completing this if you've started it using the other tools, or creating this if you haven't. The other piece that happens is it's the end of needing courses and books and audios and workshops and seminars and coaches, including mine. It's the end of seeking for truth because it's been found and experienced in the sunshine once this happens. It's the end of needing. If you like it and it's fun for you, great. More power to you, go, continue. But it's the end of the need to use techniques and tools and practices and methods and to have coaches and systems and models and all these different things in order to try to change, fix, and improve your life and get the things that you're... It's the end of all of that. Because when this, when this happens, and this is shining in, the sun is shining in fully, it's a completely different ballgame. It's a radically different ballgame. And if you want to know more about this, I said this in a different context at the beginning, if you want to know more about this, go to my website. You'll see the link again, robertscheinfeld.com/training. And when you go there, you'll see that there's a button to say if you're new or you're experienced with the teachings. Click on, go to that page, robertscheinfeld.com/training. Split yourself into new or experienced. And there's a training that is delivered through email and video that'll take you much more deeply into everything. But the purpose of this was just to explain the difference. The Busting Loose Phase 2 teachings came first. I used them for a long time, created the first real breakthroughs in my life, in my story. Radical amounts of knocking out cloud cover, which took me to the Ultimate Freedom Teachings, and then the Ultimate Freedom Teachings were created as a standalone, no prerequisite way of doing this at a much more accelerated pace that has been happening for people all over the world. It didn't just happen for me or a couple of people. It's causing this, the experience itself, no tools, no techniques, no to-do list for people all over the world, and might for you too, if it's part of your story for that to happen. So that's the answer to my question for this week. If you're tracking this sequentially, the first Friday Q&A was about the teachings. This second Q&A was about the teachings. When I look at the questions that I have queued up for future weeks, they're going to be much more not just about me or about the teachings, but about personal development questions, spiritual development questions, topics that aren't necessarily related specifically to the teachings, although my bias will certainly shine through. So stick around, stick with me. Continue to tune in to these Friday Q&As. We'll have a lot of fun together. If you receive benefit from this, you loved it, hated it, it's bubbling things through you, whatever, I invite you to leave a comment beneath this video. And if you really loved it, got a lot of benefit out of this, I invite you to share the love in whatever way you like to share, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or an email or whatever else it might be. I invite you to share this video and this YouTube channel with other people that you care about. So, until we meet again next week for the next Friday Q&A, nice chatting with you. Thanks for listening. I'll see you again soon. Have a great day.
If you'd like to get more information on what you just discovered, go ahead and click on the Learn More button that you'll see appearing in a few seconds.